All right. I'm going to hit record. Okay. Anytime you're ready, go ahead and give it a shot.
Hi, this is Tim James, founder of chemicalfreebody.com. I'm here with Jeff Smith on Vroom Vroom Veer. Unfortunately, no, just kidding. I love Jeff. He's a great guy.
Unfortunately.
And I really do. I really am very happy and to be on your podcast. And I'm really proud of you for serving our country in the military. So,
yeah. You're welcome. It was mostly wings and beer on the beach. Okay, I'm going to hit stop. I'll be right back. All right. Thanks.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Forte, thank you so much for being on Vroom Vroom Veer and welcome to the show. How's it going?
I'm doing great and excited to be here.
Awesome. So you are in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Did I say it right?
Yep.
Did I get it right? Wow.
You got it.
All right. So talk a little bit about what you're most excited about in your business today.
Well, very excited about my new book that's literally coming out this weekend
that's
as
awesome.
an ebook. I found actually a publisher found me.
Oh, wow.
And took a while to convince me to write the book. And so
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is. It's a labor of love. And you know, there's a quote that says, reading makes a broad man, writing makes a precise man.
Wow.
So that really resonates with me after sitting down and writing a book. You really have to put thought into every word.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely what you said first there was, labor of love for sure. It's a lot of work. So that's awesome. And what's the name of the book?
A.G.I.L.E Demystified.
Right.
So A.G.I.L E, for those that might not know, is something that's sweeping up predominantly business, but also in particular information technology, software development, and those sorts of things. And it's been around since 2000.
Wow.
But right now we're just getting into kind of larger organizations. And my last two clients have been financial or banking, which tends to be, they tend to
super
be
conservative.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I know. I've worked there. I know. I think they're more conservative than the federal government, which blows my mind.
Yeah, by far.
Right.
And it's interesting. I think the federal government is not spending their money, but the bank is spending their own money. So I think that makes a difference.
Right. That's true. Okay. So awesome. So this sounds like an interesting book. I like the whole idea of the agile mindset. And I think we can definitely get into that a little bit as we go. But this is Vroom Vroom Veer. So that means we have to go back in time and get the story of Frank Forte from way back. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and just outside of Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
Yep. There were cornfields across from where I lived. So, pretty rural beginning.
Right. I grew up in Michigan, so I can relate.
And I grew up in an Italian restaurant. So literally.
Wow. Nice. Oh my goodness.
I literally was born in the building or not born, but lived for the first 5 years attached to the restaurant.
Okay. So the restaurant was like every day, like part of your life.
Every day, part of the life. My grandmother owned it. My mother and father worked there. My 3 siblings all worked there. I met my wife there when she was 16, and,
wow.
and now we've been married 41 years. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning. A very close knit Italian family. Everybody had to work towards that, running that restaurant, whether it
Everybody had to chop vegetables and stir
Yeah.
sauce and make bread and right.
Yep.
Wow. Oh, that sounds like an amazing childhood, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, my grandmother started taking Social Security withholding from me when I was 9 years old.
Wow. Why not?
and I remember being quite upset about this because my grandmother said, "I'll pay you $1.25 an hour."
Oof,
And I said, "Cool."
Yeah.
But then, I was old enough to do the math, and I went back to her and I said, "Grandma, you didn't give me enough money." And she said, "Well, this is something you're going to have to learn sooner or later."
So 9 or 10, you got that lesson of, hey,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm getting ripped off here by my grandma. Most grandmas are giving you quarters.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Good for you. So I hope you got a raise.
Maybe by the time I was 16, I was actually able to run the restaurant myself.
Wow.
So my grandmother, my mom, my dad would, be off doing things, and I'd be there, cooking and managing and doing customer service and,
So you learned the whole house. You did front of house, back of house, the whole deal.
Yep. Yep.
Wow. That's nice. It's interesting, because you've got that in your back pocket.
and just tying back, a kitchen is very agile, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you have 3 or 4 cooks and you've got 100 people that you're trying to serve, there's a lot of agility going on in a kitchen. If you've ever watched, some of these cooking shows.
Oh, yeah.
How many things going on.
It's like a war. It's like a military operation. When I see, even like, obviously front of house has this, like, it's supposed to be calm, right? But like the back is just like chaos. It seems like chaos. It's organized chaos, I guess. But for the uninitiated, it looks like, just crazy execution.
Yeah. I mean, the one rule my dad had is nobody was allowed behind in the kitchen unless you were a cook. And so literally for many, many years, that was my dad, my mom, and myself. And that was it.
Wow. Okay. My goodness. Well, that's good. Fewer people is better.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Now you've just got me. every cooking show I've ever watched ever now is going through my head. So that's great. So how did you escape the kitchen, I should say? So did you end up going to college or?
No. Everybody thought we had a lot of money because we had a restaurant. We had a lot of pizza and pasta, but we didn't have a lot of money.
Okay.
So
I get it. Yep.
Reality was that my grandmother was willing to pay for me to go to college if I went to culinary school.
Oh, right.
But I veered.
Good for you. I can imagine it would be that sort of like, if you're not in love by the time, you get to college age when you grew up there, you're probably not in love with, cooking or being in the restaurant business. Right?
Yeah. I love cooking, and I still cook today, and everybody says I'm a great cook. And
probably are. You've got all the skills.
And, however, I saw what it took to run a restaurant. I saw, how many times my dad didn't get to come to a baseball game or whatever. Sure. And I just, at that point, wasn't sure, or pretty much was sure. And my dad actually was pretty solid with it. And he said, well, go join the Navy, go do something different. And that's what he did.
Right.
During the Korean War. He went, was a jet mechanic in the Korean War. He came back and ran the restaurant. But he said, no, you got to get out of here and then decide if this is for you or not.
That's a really good idea. That's a good veer. I did something similar.
and so, that kind of is the first thing. I joined the Navy, Midwest, Ohio, landlocked, pretty much. And joined the Navy. And, quite an experience, and was quite traumatized by it, I think, because
the Navy does. Yeah. So everybody knows I was in the Air Force, right? And I tell this story about how much the Navy, I didn't know, right? I'm in the Air Force. I run into Navy guys when I go to the Navy base and hang out at the exchange. And they always gave me a bunch of shit because they just think that the Air Force is like a country club.
Yeah.
And they're kind of right.
Well, and I worked with the Air Force a lot. Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. I was there for a couple of years. I was at Rhine Mine.
Nice.
Ramstein.
That's a nice spot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was literally Saudi Arabia during Desert Storm 1 with the Air Force. Not such a nice spot.
Riyadh. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to Riyadh, and
my buddy was in the Desert Storm 1, the quickie. Yeah. So he was in Riyadh. I did the second big one. So in 2002, I went to PSAB, Prince Sultan Air Base.
Yeah.
That sucked.
Well, and just to give everybody a feel of that is if you walked on the driveway, the tarmac, in the middle of the day, your boots would start melting.
Yes. You can warm up an MRE packet just by sitting in the sun. It was like better than 140 degrees sometimes in Saudi Arabia. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But at least it was a dry heat, Sarge. I did 4 months in Qatar, and you get the humidity there.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And in Dhahran, where I was, you got the humidity too. So it's still 140, 120, and 100% humidity.
Ugh. Oh my God. That's stifling. That's nuts. Ugh. So you're just constantly wanting to get out of the sun and get out. Yeah.
And then I got dysentery while I was there. That's always fun.
Man, that could kill you.
I lost 25 pounds in about 2 weeks.
Oh my God. See, there you go. Ouch.
Silver lining, I guess.
Well, you didn't die.
Yeah. Another silver lining.
Wow. Oof. Now, the closest little scare that I had was I was surprised because one day I was where was I? Saudi Arabia. And I didn't know this. I missed the memo or the email or whatever. But they came to my office and banged on the door and said, "Come on." And I'm like, "Where are we going?" "We got to go take the squadron photo out on the flight line." And I'm like, "Okay." So I grabbed my hat, but I didn't grab my water bottle. And I didn't know how long we were going to be out there. And you're always supposed to carry 2 water bottles. You know this.
Yep.
Somewhere in your cargo pockets or somewhere, because it's your job not to die. And I forgot my water, and I got a little lightheaded on the bus ride back. And we weren't out there that long. Long enough to go form up, take a picture, and come back. But anyway, I didn't get dysentery, and I didn't lose 25 pounds in 2 weeks. Okay, so how long were you in the Navy?
11 years altogether.
Wow, that's a pretty good stint.
Yeah, and really just got out off of active duty, and then eventually, because of Desert Storm 1, I had to leave the reserves because they wouldn't give me a waiver for drilling.
Right.
Even though I was in the war working with the Air Force, so it was kind of a weird scenario. But anyways, I realized that I had 2 small children, and the year that I had to make that decision, I had spent 360 days away from home port out of 365.
Right. Yeah.
And so there was a reality. I had to make a choice.
It's a good choice.
and a lot of guys don't make that choice.
Right. Especially once you get to 11-year mark.
Yeah. And I ended up in the submarine service, and you would look. So I was on the periscopes whenever we were coming into port, And everybody would call me up and say, "Do you see my wife? Do you see my wife?" And a lot of times their wife wasn't there, but a lawyer in a suit was to serve divorce papers.
Wow.
About half the time.
Wow. Holy cow. Yeah.
So guess what? I veered again.
Yeah, you got out. Probably a smart move. See, and then I get it. No, I get it. I mean, just the fact that the Navy is just, once they've got you, your break time, civilians don't understand this, but your break time is what they call shore duty, right?
Yeah.
And on shore duty, it's almost like you're kind of like in the Air Force. You're going to work, you're kind of hanging out, and then you go home and you get to be with your family. But when you're underway, or in your case, when you're at sea in your submarine, it's 24/7. It's almost like working in that kitchen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it was a tough decision. I love the Navy. I love being on submarines. I learned a lot of what I coach and write about today there about high performing teams.
Oh yeah.
So you can imagine 120 guys, and back then it was all guys. That when you leave home port, when you throw off the lines, everything on that submarine has to be fixed and operated by those 120 men.
Right. Yes.
And that's where you learn that you've got to have more than one skill, because very often if somebody gets hurt, they got sick on shore, they can't go to sea with us, somebody's got to do their job.
Wow. Yeah.
And so whether it's running a diesel engine, and I was an IT guy, so I ran computer systems that launched missiles.
Right.
So not only did I operate the computer systems, prep the missiles, all that stuff, I also had to fix all the computer systems that navigated them.
Right. Wow.
So, and guess what? If something broke, I couldn't call a tech rep, somebody, "Hey, come fix my computer system out here in the middle of the ocean."
That was you too.
Yeah.
You had to fix it too. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you're definitely invested.
Yeah.
And not only, keeping your station and your computers working, but also, staying alive.
Yeah. I mean, fire, flooding, we all trained for that. We were all prepared for it. Right. So we were just in our own little, steel pipe.
Yeah. Yeah. And if something goes wrong, you're counting on everybody, not to go to the bottom of the ocean.
And that's one of the few things is you very quickly figured out who was ready for this and who wasn't. So we had a very arduous qualification process.
Right.
Because the number one thing, are you trustworthy? If you screw up, are you going to tell everybody you screwed up?
Right.
And
own it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if you don't, it'll just get worse.
Right.
Bad things normally don't get better by themselves.
That's true. You're right. Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. But on a submarine where you have very limited time to allow them to get better. And we used to say all the time, all you got to do to die is let the outside in.
That's right. It's almost like you're in space.
Yeah. And quite honestly, we know less about the sea and underwater than we know about space.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's big. I mean, we spend more time there, I suppose. Maybe not anymore. I don't know. Since the Cold War is over, I don't know how much sub duty is going on anymore. I had a buddy when I was in the Air Force who was in the Navy. He was I guess a linguist, right?
Yep.
So his job was only on a sub.
Yep.
So when he was at home in Japan with me, but not at sea, he didn't have anything to do, which I thought was really weird. So they gave him like admin stuff, right? So this is just typical Navy. Is like, you've got your job. That's why you're here. We're not going to make shit up for you. You can help, you can help out. You can practice, you can study, you can train, but that's your job, right? You don't get to go get another job just because you're not doing your job in the ocean on a sub kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. There's whole career fields in the Air Force that their wartime duty is the same thing as it is in peace,
Yep.
So they may or may not be doing it every day, but it's not always as real as it is in the Navy. I think that's what the Navy gets props for, because every day they're not practicing. They're out there. They're either underwater or on the sea doing it, So yeah, it's a completely different kind of situation. Anyway, so you get out after 11 years. So what's your first gig after you get out?
I was hired by the computer company that made the computer systems that were on submarines.
That makes sense. Sounds typical.
And it literally doubled my salary.
Of course. So what were you, like an E6, E7, something like that?
I was an E6. I did get out of the reserves as an E7, a chief petty officer, but back then I was an E6.
Right.
And so, literally I showed up the next week on the same submarine as the tech rep working on the same computers.
That's awesome. I did something similar when I got in the Air Force. I took off my uniform. I think I was gone like 2 weeks, and then I was back, in my civvies in a different office in the same building. Yeah. So I think that's pretty typical.
Yeah. And so, again, I didn't have a college degree. I had all this computer expertise,
right?
All this life experience, but the traditional world didn't really know what to do with it.
That's true. Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. The thing about having military experience on your resume is really only other feds and federal service, and they're going to understand what's on your resume. But yeah, like regular old, like say like a bank or, typical non-fed civilian sort of situation, they don't even know what those words mean.
I work with the group. So I'm an executive coach as well as other things. So I do pro bono work with a group called Stand Beside Them for veterans.
Oh, nice.
And so we actually do free coaching. And a lot of the work I've done is with transition coaching for people getting out of the military or have gotten out and haven't gotten as far as they want to go. And, their resume and translating that military expertise, what you learn in the military,
right?
How to be a teammate, how to show up on time,
right? Right. Oh, yeah, it's huge.
Those are not perishable skills. I mean, they last in the civilian workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot of times it's just writing it in a way that the civilian community can understand, what they did.
Right. And what sort of person is going to show up.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Absolutely.
Right. And it doesn't necessarily always mean that, you're going to get the sharpest knife in the shed, but at least probably show up on time, probably look right.
Yeah.
Probably have a good attitude and want to come to work. Yeah.
Yeah. And know you got to work hard,
Yeah. And just things like this most recent job that I got with the Department of Energy, it was all sort of like the typical stuff. But what set me apart was I had done, have you ever heard of encryption? For like email. Well, it's
okay.
Entrust. Yeah. So that it does like digital signatures, and it's PKI basically for for the federal government. And it's huge in the DoD. It's all over the DoD, and the DOE is using it too. But I had done like a 2-week school in Florida for Entrust, right? And then I was I had that as part of my job. It was basically just an easy thing to do, really. Just resetting passwords, but that helped, that. And then there's this thing called video teleconference. It's kind of like what we're doing now before there was an internet that you would plug in, right, to a classified network.
Yeah.
Right. So it was all sort of like telephone-based Zoom,
Yeah.
But I had that on my resume too, so I knew how to play with those things. Now they're IP-based. It doesn't matter. For the most part, they're the same thing. Yeah. So those little things that most civilians don't even know what a VTC is, right? But everybody in the government knows what a VTC is, So, yeah. Okay. So moving on. So now how long did that gig last as your software job in the Navy?
I think that was about 3 years.
That sounds about right.
Along the way, I wanted to get into software development. So I had been primarily a hardware tech.
Okay.
And I had learned some software. I had gone to the software training for the computer systems.
Right.
And so knew how to write software.
Wow.
And what happened was a guy that I had met in the Navy, right, was working in Rhode Island, and they needed somebody that was an expert on these systems because they were rolling out a new version. It was going to be a new combat control system for the new flight of submarines.
Okay.
And so he called me up and he said, "Hey, you want a job up here in Rhode Island?" And, again, I tend to veer a lot. Okay.
Right. I can tell.
So, packed up my wife was pregnant with our third son.
Wow.
And so, packed us all up and found a house in Rhode Island and went to work for Raytheon. And
oh, nice. That's a good company.
Worked there for, I think, about another 3 years. And then, just a lot of hours, a lot of nights, because the labs were only available for software testing from midnight to 6 a.m. And
wow. Okay.
And I was going to college because, I knew that I had to get this degree.
Right.
To be credible to the rest of the world.
Right.
So I thought, I'll just, because more to come on that.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I thought, right.
Yeah. So, and anyways, I literally had this big ask. They said, "Hey, right now, the plan is, the testing is going to take 18 months, and that's 6 more months than we have. And for every week we're late, we're going to get charged $100,000.
Wow.
Okay. And this is back when $100,000 meant something.
Right. Okay. Sure.
And so literally, we all rallied, and I used the same concepts that I used on the submarine to get everybody together to get work done, whether it was loading torpedoes or loading food or whatever, right? So I just kicked into that mode. Okay, we got a big mission to get done. Let's rally. Let's get it done.
Right.
And literally, we brought it down to the point where we were within 10 days of being on time.
Wow.
And the Navy waived the extra fee because we got so close.
Wow.
And so they just waived it. So that was awesome. That was a huge win.
Yeah.
Well, the next week I got laid off.
Of course, because you finished.
So,
it's almost like be careful to do too well. Almost.
Yeah.
Don't do too well. That's
so
okay.
We hadn't really financially recovered from the prior move.
Right.
So literally, it's like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad. And we took this opportunity for me to go back to college full time. So moved in with my parents.
Oh, wow. With 3 kids. Holy cow.
3 kids and a wife.
That's a good family.
Went back to Ohio State to school. And oh, by the way, I'm back in the kitchen cooking.
Right.
During
How could you not
lunches.
be?
So did that up until the last semester of my senior year. And then guess what? Same group of people called me back and said, hey, we need an expert that knows how to test this stuff. And I said, well, I don't have my degree yet. And they said, Frank, we don't care about your degree. We know you know how to do this stuff.
You've already done it. What do you need a degree for? And you're like, shut up about your degree.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I'm like,
what the hell did I do it for?
Yeah, busting my butt, taking all these software classes that I already knew and all this, and taking math and all, calculus and physics and all that stuff. And it's like, so then, literally, that set me on a path to kind of go to work for Computer Sciences Corporation, which I've happened to work there twice on 2 different government contracts.
Right. Okay.
One for the Navy and one for the Army. So.
Wow. Okay. And basically, you're sort of like running software tests.
Yep. Yeah. And by then I was writing the requirements for the missile guidance system.
Wow.
For the Tomahawk cruise missile, which is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
We kind of knew that it worked when Desert Storm 2 kicked off.
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, so it does work.
We actually got to play with the toys.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's fun. Wow. You really have been like all over.
Yeah.
Right. So like,
yeah.
And we're not even halfway in. So that's great.
Yeah.
So you said you also worked for the Air Force too. So how did that work out, and what did you do for the Air Force?
Well, so while I was working for CSC, Computer Sciences Corporation, and you can see all the various companies I've worked for on my website, ForteLeaderTech.com.
Okay.
But and so if you go there, you can tell we're not even halfway through with the conversation.
I get it. Yeah, we might have to have a part 2. That's okay. We'll see how far we get.
So anyways, I was sitting in this office all by myself, writing specifications for this guidance system. And I had finished this 200-page document.
Wow.
And back then it really was a paper document. So I was getting pretty bored. As you can tell, I don't like to be sitting still and not doing anything. And
right. So writing is kind of dry and boring for you.
Yeah. So they said, oh yeah, you'll be able to validate your requirements in about 2 years. And I'm like, yeah, that's not working for me.
That's really boring.
Yeah. And so anyways, again, Desert Storm 1 was Desert Storm 2 was kicking off.
Okay.
So there was this other program that for all these Air Mobility Command, the C-130s, C-5s, the big cargo planes.
Right.
All those bases were getting a new logistics system that computer science put together.
Okay.
And they needed system admins. And so I had this deep technical background, and I knew networks and I knew Unix and all that stuff. So they sent me to training, and McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey was my first assignment. And what we did is all the aircraft, the cargo planes, were leaving from McGuire or the East Coast and going to Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
So there was a push, right? And so I was there trying to operate this and work with them, and they did this early release of this system. Because it was so bad, you had everybody in the Air Force said, hey, we need to get stuff over to Saudi Arabia. Well, the Air Force is good at activating, and so they launched 1 million planes from every base on the East Coast. But guess what? They didn't have any room to park them, and they had no visibility to how many planes were actually sitting there in Saudi Arabia at the time.
That sounds very Air Force. Yes. Sorry, Air Force, but it sounds familiar. Hurry up, let's go. Oh, shit.
And so they didn't have enough mechanics. They didn't have enough people to fuel.
Of course.
The crews had to rest. They didn't have enough places for them to sleep.
But they were there, damn it.
Yeah. And literally they could not move the aircraft because they had no room.
Wow. Okay.
So I got a call and said, hey, we want you to go to Saudi Arabia for 9 months. And I'm like,
really?
Okay.
Well, you get extra pay.
Yeah. And I had already been there, so I knew what I was getting into. And that really, everything on this should be taken with a grain of salt because I did the same thing twice. And I volunteered to do it. So
both times. Yes. And you volunteered second time after you already knew. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyways, I get there and, the system has been not working and a lot of pressure from a lot of people, including my company. And so I just start, piecing it together, replacing fiber optic cables and we actually laid the fiber optic on the sand,
wow. Okay.
to the maintenance building and wherever. So, I mean, this was austere.
Oh yeah.
I dug, our foxholes. I helped, dig foxholes because guess what? If we were getting bombed, I'd be part of the,
Sure.
I want a place in a foxhole.
That's right. That's right. You want your own hole. I get it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the interesting thing is the requirement from the Air Force is people could only be there 90 days and then they had to rotate out.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was there for 9 months. So
you're a civilian, so
yeah.
You can do anything we want with you.
So I became the subject matter expert.
Of course.
And I would drive everybody around because driving in Saudi Arabia is crazy.
Right. And you were off base probably.
Yeah. I was off post and, people want to go down to a shuk, a silver shop or whatever.
Right.
And
go get some gold or some silver. Right.
And we actually got scudded. The Toys R Us right down the road got scudded. And
oops.
So,
you mean they actually hit something?
Yeah, they did. They did.
When I was in Saudi Arabia, I'll tell you my funny Saudi Arabia story because it has to do with civilian contractors. So you'll like this because you've been on both sides like me. When Prince Sultan Air Base, they had like 2 areas, right? There was like the fancy, nice place that the Saudis built for us to live in with the pool and the restaurants and the dorms and stuff. Very Air Force, right?
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah, right. Very plush. Still looked like a prison, but still, it was plush. But the ops area was like about a half hour, maybe 40-minute bus ride to like this tent city compound thing that had been there since the first Desert Storm, I think. And that's where all the ops were. That's where the flight line was and everything else. So, you're constantly, in the morning you're going to work and then in the afternoon you're going back to the dorm, right? So there was a kind of like a rule. If you had like a vehicle, like a POV or a rental or whatever.
Yeah.
You saw somebody waiting for a bus at the bus stop, you had to give them a ride. It was sort of like an written rule. And these contractors saw me and this other airman person sitting at the bus stop, and they were kind enough to pull over in their little rented car, sedan, whatever, and give us a ride back to the other side. And as we get in the car, they give each other this sort of like look, right? There's like, are we going to do the jump? And and the other airmen that I don't know, I just kind of like look at her, she looks at me, and I look at them, and I'm like, nah, they're just screwing with us, right? So then we proceed into this half-hour ride, and we get to like about the last mile or so before the next gate, and they pull over and they go, okay, here we go. Here's the jump. And now we're actually going, oh shit, this is actually going to happen. So what was going on was there was construction, right? And there was like this L turn where that's where they pulled over. So, and then the rest was just this long straightaway and then a bunch more turns and then you're in the gate. But they were doing construction. So there was this big ramp that you were supposed to slow down and go over real gentle, like, right? And these guys were crazy enough to think they were like Bo and Luke Duke and the Dukes of Hazzard. Whee! And we jumped. We landed and we were okay, but it was hilarious. And I'm sure that the suspension on that rented vehicle was pretty tore up. Anyway, I digress. So that was my funny Saudi story. So how did you get out of Saudi Arabia? Did you do all right?
Well, I'll tell you this story too. So civilians had to turn in their passport to a Saudi representative.
Okay, right.
Saudi
so they
customs.
hold them for you.
They actually, for you. I like the way, like they're doing you a favor, right?
I'll hold this for you.
So when I was getting ready to leave, and I had been there a long time, and I had met the guy that was in the Saudi that was in charge. His office was right next to the computer room, and so I had known that guy. But then a new guy came in and really hadn't gotten to know him. And so, anyways, I go to get my passport stamped, so I get it back first and foremost, and get out of there. And the guy said, "You're Saudi." And I'm like,
what?
I very delicately, thank you for the compliment. I'm actually a U.S. citizen, and I'm here to get my passport back. Well, then your mother must be Saudi. And I'm like, and I did look pretty rough by then. I had a full beard. My hair was grown. I don't think I got it cut the whole time I was there. And I was dark, and I'm Italian, so I've got olive skin to begin with.
Gotcha.
I tend not to.
You had gone local.
Yeah. I had gone native. I was like,
okay.
And so I'm like, I'm sitting here inside my head. How the heck do I get out of this? I want to go home. This guy is holding my passport.
Yeah, for me.
How do I navigate this without creating an international incident? So I just said, yeah, my mother must have Saudi blood in her background. Yep, that's got to be it.
Yeah, and that was over then, and he gave you your passport.
Well, and he's like, he looked and he said, "Are you sure you're not Saudi?" And he kind of like, "Where'd you get this U.S. passport?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, you're right. It's my mom, but I was born in the United States." Kind of got him comfortable with that, and finally he gave me the stamp to get out of the country.
So basically, he was just jerking your chain.
Probably, but at that point, after being in country for 9 months,
you weren't prepared for that kind of
changer.
Yeah. Or maybe he was legitimately confused.
Yeah.
I would rather him be jerking my chain.
Yeah. No, it
Saudis don't have that kind of sense of humor, though, do they? They really don't.
It seemed real in the moment. I got to assure you that.
I believe it. Well, at least you got out of there and you didn't die again. So good for you.
So again, I got out of there, and what did I do? I zoomed again. I veered. I zoomed and I veered.
First you vroomed, and then you zoomed, and then you veered. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I zoomed out of there, and then guess what? I get this offer to go live in Germany with my family for 3 years.
Ooh, where? What part?
Frankfurt. And
Frankfurt's nice.
Again, so the Air Force needed somebody to run the logistics system at Rhein-Main, which is right next to Frankfurt International Airport.
Right. That's a good spot.
Yeah, it was a really good spot. We were able to, didn't live on post. We didn't want to do that, but our kids went to school on post.
Okay.
And, we had exchange privileges and all that, which is kind of unusual for a contractor.
It is. Yeah.
And so, we went there for 3 years. My wife loved it. The kids loved it. We did Boy Scouts all over Europe with them.
Nice. And because you're in Frankfurt, that means you're right there by the airport, which is cool.
and we just traveled all over. My oldest son, when he was 11, the Boy Scouts arranged to go to Switzerland for a skiing trip.
Ooh,
and we stayed in a Frank Lloyd Wright designed house.
Wow, that's awesome.
So, but it was, and the reason I did that, part of the calculus is I wanted my kids to see what it's like to live outside the United States.
Right.
Yes. And you have this kind of stereotype of the ugly American, right? And I wanted them, it blew their mind that there was different money system.
Right. Yes.
In Germany.
Oh, yeah.
It blew their mind that there was a different measurement system.
Yeah.
All these things were like
everything that you take for granted that's just the way it is. When you live over in a different country, you just realize that it's not a right or wrong. It's just different.
Yeah.
Right. And everything's made up. Right. Why is it this way? Oh, that's just the way we did it.
And the neat thing is Germans are very precise.
Very precise. Yes.
And, you, even just watching them repair roads. I mean, they go down about 6 feet. Ooh. And they build up the layers. That's why their Autobahns are like smooth as glass.
Yeah.
Wow. And another thing I learned,
20 and it's okay.
Yeah. And then you get these Americans, mostly moms in minivans that get onto the Autobahn
on the fast lane, and they're in the way.
Fast lane. Yeah.
I know.
And they're doing 55.
Yeah. No, that's not good.
And one of the so I was over there before my family moved over, and I had a rental car. So I had a BMW 525i as the rental car. And so all the contractors that rolled through this role would just keep handing that car off to the next contractor. So we literally had that car for about a year, and it was always operated by a consultant working in this role.
Nice. Wow.
And that was a lot of fun. And
good gig.
And they do go 140 miles an hour if anybody's interested.
But only on the Autobahn in the fast lane.
Yes. And then that's not that fast, because what'll happen is you'll be in the left-hand lane and you'll see somebody flash their lights from literally 2 miles away.
Right.
And by the time you look and get over, they're blowing your doors off.
Wow. So they're really moving.
They're going over 200 miles an hour.
Oh my God. That's nuts. I don't know how anybody. Ugh. Yeah, I'm okay with like 70, 75. I'm good with that. I'm Mario Andretti. I'm not. It sounds like you had some fun. You know what though? I think we're going to have to save the rest for part 2. I think we're going to have to start wrapping up. I mean, you've got stuff to do. I've got stuff to do. We're already an hour in, Frank. We're having a good time, but let's wrap this up and say we'll put a pin in it and we'll get the rest of your stories for part 2. So as we wrap up, talk a little bit about the new book, talk about your business and anything else, how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. I'll just, if you're a veteran out there listening, Stand Beside Them is a great resource to you. Executive coaches donate their time.
Wow.
So, nice. Look into that. My website, forteleadertech.com.
Nice. Okay.
And then you can get the book there. You can set up an appointment with me for executive coaching, agile coaching. whatever you might need. And my model is to give you a half hour free.
Wow, nice.
Just to see if we are compatible to work together.
Right.
So Jeff, a little bit like, we did here, just to get to know each other a little bit and build a bit of relationship and see if it's a match. So
right.
Happy to do that. Look forward to this podcast coming out. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
Frank M. Forte is.
I'll link to that in your website in the show notes. So make it easy for people. Yep.
Awesome.
All right. Perfect. Sounds like you got a call coming in. It must be time to quit.
Yeah, I live on Zoom, as you well know. So.
All right. Well, hey, I will let you go so you can take that other call.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Great.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.